Was that your stuff?
What? I don't know if I'm hungry or about to shit myself. G'day and welcome to episode 1 of Guns, Hoses and Stretchers.
Oh, fuck, I wrote staging area wrong.
No, I'm joking. Are you going to ask questions straight up? So you're just going to say, welcome to episode 2. We're talking about this, and then bam, fire into
I'll shut the fuck up. Hello again, and welcome to this week's episode of The Staging Area. I'm Hayden Mack, and that's Simon Roylance.
Hello.
Now, after the success of last week's show,
Huge
it
success.
just went huge.
It was massive, that
I
intro.
know, the intro show.
Viral to
I
the
know.
whole 4 people.
Thank
that have
you
seen
for
it.
everybody.
Thanks to the 4 people.
Yeah.
Us being 2 of the 4.
I had to edit the fucking thing, and now I've got to sit through it and watch it again. Oh,
That's why you're the producer, mate. I'm just the talent.
the talent. Yeah, we'll do
And I'll
that.
use that very loosely.
All right. Now, we have a topic today on episode 2. And that topic is, if my phone will open and not be a pain in the bum, the topic is fire rescue medical transfer. I'll read it again. Fire rescue and medical transferring to a nationwide civil defence. Now, Simon, this is a topic you've brought to the table.
Mm.
What the fuck is civil defence?
All right, so to put it pretty plainly and basically, and I understand this is a very basic concept of it, okay, there's a lot more that goes into this, but if we have a look at the current state of play across Australia, every single state is financed and ran by their own state government, okay, and they get a bit of a tip in from the federal government, okay. In particular, they manage their own resources and their own organisation. So if you look at here in Victoria, we have a look at our emergency services. We have the Country Fire Authority, also known as the CFA for short. We have what's now Fire Rescue Victoria, again known short as FRV. We have State Emergency Services, which is short SES. We have Ambulance Victoria, which is generally just known as Ambulance Victoria. It used to be Rural Ambulance Victoria and whatever, but now it's just Ambulance Victoria across the state. And then we have some offshoot volunteer rescue organisations. So we look at Shepparton. Shepparton's got Shepparton Search and Rescue. And then they have, you've got Echuca Search and Rescue, which basically provide rescue services like the SES and CFA do, but just in that rescue space. But they're technically not in those organisations, although they do have, some direct connection with some of the organisations, and they use some of the other organisations' capability and infrastructure to run those little groups. You've got the Coast Guard, which predominantly sits under CFA these days, but they have their Coast Guard requirements. Then we've got Surf Lifesaving Victoria, which obviously used to be mainly for the beaches, but they've expanded in the last couple of years, which we'll talk about shortly. And so then we've got, you've got DALP, or what's now known as DECA, which is our forestry and climate change and environmental agencies, where they've got Forest Fire Management Victoria, who look after forest firefighting. So there's a couple of organisations and agencies, and then we've got Emergency Management Victoria as well down here in Victoria, who kind of oversees some of the preparedness and some of the response arrangements and looks at legislation and recovery and a whole lot of other bits and pieces. And then we've got Bushfire Recovery Victoria, which is another organisation that got kicked off after the 1920 bushfires down here in Victoria. So we've got all these people playing in this space. And the state government funds them. And they do get a little bit of help from federal, but it's mainly state government that fund it. So you then go and look at all the other states in Australia, and we've got the same process. You go up to New South Wales, we've got New South Wales Fire Rescue, New South Wales Rural Fire Service, New South Wales Ambulance Service, New South Wales SES, New South Wales, I think it's called Volunteer Rescue Association or something similar to that. And they've probably got a whole, and then now they've got their recovery organisation, which kicked in following the 1920 bushfires. And they've got all these other agencies there as well that deal with fire and rescue and emergency management and response. And you go to Queensland, it's the same thing. Queensland's got all these different agencies, and Northern Territory and WA and South Australia and Tasmania, ACT, got all these agencies operating in states that deal with emergencies and emergency response and management and preparedness and recovery. The stupid thing is that we spend a lot of money in this space, and the money gets spent stupidly. And I'll make that very fucking clear. Our politicians and the agencies are wasting money every single day in these organisations. We also have fighting between all the organisations about who gets paid more money, who gets a bit more money, whose equipment's better, whose training's better, and all this comes down to the money process and the way that these organisations are ran. And it's not even early stage right now. Let's not even get into the volunteer agencies, organisations, and the unions and things that also get involved in all that process as well, because that's almost a whole nother episode or two on its own. We probably need to have a few drinks before we go down that path. But so we've got that across the country, and then we have at the federal level, we've got our National Emergency Management Agency, which again kicked off more recently, and they've got millions, if not billions of dollars that have been placed into them to look at recovery and trying to bring all the agencies together across the country. But they're really just sitting in the background. They're doing good work. I'm not saying they're not doing any good work, but they're really just ticking some boxes along the way, and they're helping out where they can, and it's good, but it could be much better. Okay. Now, if we look at some other countries, okay, now you got to remember, Australia, yes, we're a big country, okay, but we're actually still quite small compared to other countries right around the world, okay. We face some pretty big natural disasters every few years. We've just been through the last 2 years of floods right around this country. Just prior to that, we had the 1920 bushfires. They led into floods. We had COVID in between all of that, then more floods, and now we're starting to come out of that process. And over the next 10 years, Australia will dry out. And in 10 years' time, as our history dictates, we will have another significant bushfire season where people's lives will be lost, houses will be lost, significant destruction to our environment, which will only just recovering from the last bushfires, okay? So look at that whole process, and we go, well, as a large country, why do we not have a civil defence structure where all of these emergency services and all these agencies finally go into one agency, okay, with one set of uniform, one set of rules, one set of training, one set of command structure? We have greater buying power in equipment and vehicles and uniforms. So how this effectively works is, and it's done in other countries and it's done quite well there, and this is why I believe it can work here in Australia, and it's something that we need to really start seriously looking at and advocating for and pushing towards. We have, at the federal level, we have a civil defence, very much like our military is. Okay, so if we look at our military here in Australia, our military is spread out right across the country, but they have one set of uniform, one set of rank structure. Obviously, Army, Air Force, Navy, a little bit different in what they call things, but they have one set of uniform for those agencies or for that organisation. If we just take military, let's look at the Army in particular. Okay, if we look at the Army, they have one set of command structure right across the country. So if you're a soldier who's up in Queensland, then you move from Queensland, you come down here to, say, Puckapunyal, which isn't too far from where we are right now. They go to Puckapunyal. The rank structure is still the same. The training is all provided under a national requirement out of their training facility, or the facility at Kapuka there when you first become a soldier. Then from there you move on, you do what's called initial employment training. So you go and specialise in the area that you join the military for, or the Army for. But when you go there, okay, the rank structure is still the same, the uniform's still the same, the expectation is still the same. Then you can move in your career. You can move around the country going to different brigades or different units within the military, but you're still in the one organisation. The expectation is the same across the board. They can move their resources at the drop of a hat because it's a national resource. Here, when we look at our emergency services and the way we're doing things now, it's all state-based, state-owned. Different rank structures, different call signs, different infrastructure, different vehicles, different equipment, different training, right across the board, yet our training is meant to be a national unit of competency. But I can tell you right now, as a volunteer in Victoria, if you're a CFA volunteer, you leave here and you move to Queensland because you want to go and be where that's a bit warmer. Makes a whole heap of sense, okay, for a lot of people. You go up there and you join their fire service up there, you go through a whole heap of processes to be able to go and get on that fire truck because you're going to a completely different state with a different set of rules, different set of command structure, different requirements, different vehicles, different equipment, okay? But the training was meant to be the same. It was meant to be nationally unified, but it's not. It's still not to this day. So I guess the theory of this process is we can cut down on wasting a lot of money in these agencies and these organisations by putting them all into a civil defence fire and rescue organisation. We have one set of command structure across the country, one set of uniform, one set of vehicle types. So obviously in each state there is going to be tweaks in the way we have our vehicles because of different terrain and different whatever it may be, but the vehicle process is going to be the same. Okay, and if you go there, you just get upskilled on that particular vehicle. The training nationally would be exactly the same. So no matter where you go, no matter what you do, if you're doing bushfire or wildfire training, that's what it's going to be. That's the bare minimum right there for you to do that. Then as you move forward and you might become a crew leader or a strike team leader or a sector commander or whatever it may be, and you go up and you do those extra bits of qualification, it's still the same across the country. Yes, again, locally at the state level, there might be some slight tweaks because of different terrain and different environmental conditions, but overall it's going to be the same. In doing so, when we have people moving around the state or moving around the country, okay, if you pack up here in Victoria and you want to move your family to Western Australia, okay, as a volunteer or as a paid firefighter, you should just be able to transfer to that state, that state area of command. You just transfer there, and when you arrive there at whatever that station's going to be, you walk in with your uniform, which you can just take with you. Okay, so you rock up there with your uniform all ready to go. You rock into a command structure, you already know. Infrastructure, you already know. The process, the wording is still all the same. You rock in the door, you sign, the transfer paperwork's been done long before you leave, you rock in that day, you're still at your same level of competence, your same level of expertise, you're potentially your same rank level depending on what rank you are, and that's another thing we can talk about probably in another episode, but you go in at the same rank level, you kick off and away you go. Okay, that day, once your station commander, maybe a month down the track, your station commander, your captain, your lieutenant, whatever it is that command structure is, after a month later, they might sign up to say, yep, we're happy with you being able to drive vehicles under emergency conditions, but everything else you've done is ready to go. There's no requirement to be retrained. There's no requirement to fork out more money for another uniform for somebody. You've already got it. The benefit in doing all this stuff also comes down to major emergencies, major disasters, okay? A lot of people don't understand, and I get people arguing, oh, it's not that hard, we do it pretty quickly. It's still very slow. If we have a fire or a major emergency over the border, okay, processes have put in place to make sure that we can't go there until everything's been ticked and flicked by everybody. So their commissioner or their chief up there, say in New South Wales, has to request that they need resources from us in Victoria. That's then going to go up the chain to the emergency management minister or emergency services minister in New South Wales, then to the premier. Then all the phone calls get had. There's a whole lot of confusion about that phone call generally, I think, because we seem to sit around a fair bit these days, all right? Then once it all gets approved, a day or two down the track, we finally get vehicles and people organised and we send them over the border once they've been given permission to go over the border to go into that space to assist. Then when we get there, generally speaking at an incident management team level, at the ICC level, we can normally we can fit in there pretty well because it's kind of the same across the country. But on the ground, there's all these different things that you've got to pick up and learn, all these different sayings. There's different equipment. We got, there's different couplings that from every state seems to have their own different coupling, and no one's couplings fit each other. I don't know why they don't. These things.
It's just like the fucking trains.
It's just like the trains, right? It's stupid.
Different train tracks in each state.
100%, and then so you got all these different train lines for different vehicles, It's the same thing with us here. In this process, we're wasting a shitload of money every year. And we are wasting time with training people in all these different states. You get trained here in Victoria, cost a heap of money to train you, be it paid or volunteered, cost a lot of money to train you. Then you move to New South Wales or Queensland or Western Australia or Tasmania if you wanted to go down south. Then they have to pay for you to be trained, even though you've already been trained or already have experience and knowledge. So the idea is if we can go to this civil defence style process with fire and rescue, okay, across the country, not only are we going to save a lot of money, we are going to bolster our resources and our capability right across this great land of ours and make it so much better for the communities that we are supposed to be responding to assist in their time of need. It also means we can start looking better at our emergency preparedness, emergency management right across the board. Okay, it's also going to cull a lot of the issues that we've got within the different agencies and within the different states. So that's the the idea or the purpose of having a civil defence process where our fire and rescue organisations sit in there. There's going to be a lot of people who see this episode, hopefully early on, but it might take a few months for people to cotton on to what you and I are doing here. But there'll be a lot of people who will have some resistance to this, okay, for a lot of different reasons. The main one and the biggest argument I always get when I talk to politicians and I talk to agencies and I talk to people on the ground about this, everyone goes, oh, well, our constitution and our laws and our policies and our procedures, that'll stop that from happening. Mate, I'll call that for what that is. That is utter fucking bullshit. All right? It is outright bullshit. We saw during COVID how quickly state and federal governments can change laws and manipulate legislation and make things happen literally at the drop of a hat. Yet as soon as it comes to doing something like this, everyone wants to put up walls and go, no, we can't do that because it's not in the Constitution and, you know, the states have to look after emergencies and not the federal government, and all this bullshit gets thrown around. The reality is we can do it. We can literally do it in a couple of days. Will it cost money? Yeah, it'll cost money. Everything costs money. But eventually that money will come back to us. It always does, always will. People always argue, well, you know, the federal government, they don't have the money to fund a national service for fire and rescue. Okay? All the money comes from the states. Well, I agree with you there. 100% I agree with you. But let's have a look at it this way, all right? This is my theory. And please tell me if you think this is ridiculous, all right? Because you and I have had these conversations about finances and things before at the state and federal level, okay? Federal government gets money through the taxes that they're already now putting into the National Emergency Management Agency, okay? So that becomes part of the federal process right there, okay? We create this civil defence process. That money from NEMA, whatever they call themselves, that money just gets transferred to the civil defence process straight away. Money goes straight to them, okay? So the money's already there in that sense. Then across the board at the state level, states should still be required to fund the emergency services being provided to their state, okay? Now, the way that this would happen is at the moment, we'll use Victoria as a perfect example, you know, they've got a budget for all of these different agencies. That budget remains, okay? That budget remains in that state so that they can help coordinate the recruiting of people, both volunteer and paid. It helps with all the bits and pieces, vehicles and structures and infrastructure and all that stuff, technology, all those things we need to help with emergency services, training, all that great stuff, okay? They're still required to provide that, and that money goes for that particular state. And we set up some sort of system where we know that, you know, every time the population increases in the state, the budget has to go up for these particular things. That is still a requirement by the state. The state government still has to do that. They can't renege on that. They can't pull their funding out. They've still got to fund those organisations, but instead of it going to multiple organisations where some people are getting, you know, a lot of money up here on the table, they're having a beautiful dinner, and then there's people underneath that table grabbing all the scraps. Instead, it's one process. One set of equipment, one set of training, one set of everything. So it's a fair process for everybody. One set of uniform, one set of command structure, so that the state itself is making sure that their part of the state is well and truly looked after. Now, some people argue, but then some states put more into it than others. I agree, but that's going to happen regardless. With the federal support, greater buying power of equipment, greater buying power of vehicles, infrastructure, technology, testing things, programs, all this stuff, we will have a national buying power now. Therefore, those smaller states or states that struggle with their budgets in that space will be able to potentially get things much cheaper. Therefore, they can do a lot more with their dollar, get a lot more bang for their buck, so to speak. All right. So that's the idea around the civil defence stuff. Now, can it work in Australia? Yes, it can. The only reason why it won't work is politicians who don't want to do it, media who will come up with bullshit excuses for why it can't happen and not actually think about it, and people who are scared of change and significant change. All right, which you and I have seen many times in these organisations and these agencies, okay? One of the big ones from the people on the ground, generally speaking, believe it or not, is tradition. We will lose tradition. We will lose our culture. We will lose everything that is what we are. Now, I'll ask you a question, okay? You and I have been involved in CFA, I've been in it since I was born, but let's just say 26 years on paper. How long have you been in now?
I think it's 19 years, 20
Yeah.
years this year.
You have to be pushing 20 for
Yeah.
sure, definitely. So 20 years. In the CFA, we've got a lot of traditions. Okay, we have traditions. Our torchlights are a tradition.
Yeah.
Okay, some of the can't say hazing because apparently that's not appropriate anymore. But we have some things where when you're a new recruit coming through the process. A perfect example: new recruit, first time on a job. What happens to you?
Yeah, pushed into the.
You get pushed into the mud,
into the soot,
into the dirt,
Yeah.
into the blackened area. Okay, sometimes you end up
because
rolling
your
down a
yellows
hill.
are too clean.
Yellows are too clean. But it's a tradition for us to
Yeah.
do that. We don't do it in a harmful way, in a hurtful way. You know it's happening. Everybody knows it's coming. Always happens at the end of the fire when things are much safer and whatever else. There's probably some arguments now that maybe it's not safe because of carcinogens and things like that, which we're now learning more about. So I accept that. I'm not saying that we should go and push people down hills now. But it was a part of our tradition. You did that. It was kind of like it was almost like a birthing. It's like you've been through recruits, you did your training, you did your bits and pieces, and now you've made it to your first fire, and you've come out okay, and you've done probably a good job. You've probably worked your ringer off because the newbie always gets stuck doing the hard stuff because, again, it's a part of the tradition initially to build you up, okay? Now we do that. And when you come back to the fire station, you have this smile on your face because it's like you've now been accepted as someone. So that's a part of our traditions. Okay, we've got lots of other traditions. Obviously here in Victoria, we're about to move into one of our biggest traditions next weekend, being Good Friday. Okay, we always, and that happens right across the country, but here in Victoria, we are very big on, our fire services and our emergency services really get behind the Good Friday appeal this coming Friday, right? So these are traditions that won't go away though. Even if we move to a civil national, they're not going to go anywhere. We're still going to do them. The only difference will be we might pick up some new traditions from other states that we know nothing about, and they might adopt some of our traditions. Those traditions will stay. We won't lose them. Our concepts and some of the things we do won't change because, again, we will share them with other people at a bigger space nationally, and we will adopt things from other people who we don't really get to see because we close ourselves off. That line on the border, that's it. We're done there, So we're actually going to grow as organisations or as people in that space. But we're also going to get new traditions and new parts of culture, and we're going to share things, and things will be, I believe, so much greater just for the people involved in the services as well as our community, which at the end of the day, that's who we're there for. We're there for the community, not for ourselves, not for the government, not for the media, not for anything that you might get that's a luxury that sometimes we get given free things, which is very far and few between, to be honest. We do it for our community at the end of the day. And there is a component where, I've said this to you a lot of times over the last few years, I've become very frustrated with our organisations. I've said to people, I don't do it for the organisation anymore. I do it for the people standing next to me in that organisation, my brothers, my sisters, literally my family, and then my adopted brothers and sisters and family within the organisations. I do it for them, and I do it for my community. I don't do it for any other reason. Anything else we get is a bonus, okay? And that's why we put up with so much shit that we put up with from politicians, the media, the organisations, and lots of other people in between, okay? So I guess the theory is if we could move down this path, then we are going to be a stronger Australia in this space. We're going to be stronger for our communities, which is why we're there. And we're actually going to increase our capability, but we're also going to increase our traditions and our, some of our reason for being in these organisations. So the argument of we're going to lose tradition and culture is bullshit. We're going to lose our state-based insignia. We're all proud of our insignia. I'm a very happy individual at the moment over the last probably 2 years because CFA here in Victoria is moving away from that stupid CFA fucking checkers logo thing that we got given many years ago because someone in corporate thought it was a great idea and the government wanted to save money on, how often they printed our logo or our crest. We're moving away from that stupid checkers thing, and we are putting our CFA insignia back on our uniforms. They're hopefully, fingers crossed, there's talk about them going back on our uniforms, back on our stations, so that it's very clear that that's our insignia, that's for our firefighters. That is tradition for us. That insignia means so much to so many firefighters here in Victoria. People argue we're going to lose that. We're not going to lose it. It's still going to be there. It should still be displayed in all of our state stations for people to remember where we came from. But to also understand that going from that to a new process, to a new civil defence is better for our community, and that's what we're supposed to be there for. The community has to be at the heart of every conversation we have about emergency services, emergency management, and emergency preparedness. And if we can't do that, then as individuals within those organisations, we are being selfish and we are not doing what is right for the people of Australia or for the people within our own state that we look after.
Well, one thing to come up from that.
Mm.
How do you sort out the volunteer situation? Because they'll be doing exactly the same training as a paid person. Will volunteers then be expected to be paid?
So, again, this is going to throw us better in the works, and people are going to be, oh, we can't do that. How much money is this going to cost us? All right. Emergency services in every state in Australia, okay, they are getting exceptionally busy. All right. The more population growth we have, the more people coming in from overseas, all those great things that are happening in this country, we're expanding rapidly right across the country. Our volunteers are getting pushed to the brink as it is now. Okay, they are exceptionally busy. Many volunteer, and I got to preface this, and I got to make this really clear for those people in the community who might happen to see this podcast and listen to this episode that don't understand how the volunteer system works. Okay, be really clear about this. Volunteers in the SES, in the CFA, in Surf Life Saving Victoria, in those other rescue associations I spoke about earlier from like Shepparton and Echuca Way, up in those areas, and anywhere else that they may be that I'm not aware of. Any other volunteer organisation around this country, particularly in that rescue and fire space, they don't get paid a cent. I'm looking straight at the camera here so people understand this. They don't get paid diddly squat. They do it purely for free. Purely out of the goodness of their hearts, they do it. They get nothing. There is no tax write-off. They don't get no insurance is paid for. They don't get their registration paid for. All these bullshit myths that float around every year. They don't get paid shit. Have you ever been paid for all the amount of hours and work we've done in the CFA? No, I haven't either. I don't complain about that because I choose to do it, all right? But there's a lot of people in the community who thinks we get paid when we go there. We don't, all right? But other states have what we call retained firefighters or auxiliary firefighters. So if you look at New South Wales, perfect example, and I think South Australia's got the same, and I believe Queensland's got the same process. I'm not sure about WA or NT or Tasmania. I know AC doesn't have the process, but we have retained firefighters. So in some of the states where you've got your, your urban fire organisation. So New South Wales Fire Rescue, perfect example. New South Wales Fire Rescue have 2 tiers of firefighters. They're tier 1. And I don't mean that by any form of respect or disrespect for anyone here, but I'm just saying tier 1 for them is they're paid everyday firefighters who that is their full-time job. That is what they do. They get paid to be there, to be on station and to do that every day. Then in their outer suburban areas and right into regional New South Wales, okay, New South Wales Fire Rescue is still in all those communities to deal with the fire and rescue components, so urban firefighting and rescue components within those communities. They have retained firefighters. So those firefighters generally all have a full-time job doing something else. You know, they might be a butcher, they might work in the supermarket, they might be a graphic designer, they might be a content creator, they could work in media. Who knows what they do? They could be a farmer, welder, whatever. Okay? They're working in that space. But they're attached to their local fire station as a retained firefighter. So when their pager goes off and they respond to the station for that fire call and they attend that fire call, they get paid a certain amount. It's like a casual employment type process where they get paid a certain amount, an hourly rate to be there. They get paid for the travel that they do from home to the fire station for fire calls. They get paid when they train. They get paid when they go on long time or campaign emergency management responses around the country if they're lucky enough to be selected to go. So they get paid for that process. It's very much like if we look at the military. The military, we have full-time paid soldiers, and then we have our reservists. And when our reservists go on train and when they are actively involved in duty doing whatever it is that they do, they get paid to do that process. Then in New South Wales, again, they have the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, which also responds to rescue events. They also respond to urban-type firefighting to support New South Wales Fire Rescue. In some towns, they are the only person who can respond to urban firefighting. They do all the rural stuff as well, all the bushfire stuff and the plan burning and things like that. They are purely volunteers. They aren't getting paid a cent to do that. My theory is, with the way things are going now, we are already struggling across the nation. Don't believe that we're not. We are. Also, don't believe the bullshit media that's come out recently. There's been some media articles right across this country recently talking about the amount of volunteers leaving organisations. Some of that's been hyped up. Not all of it, but some of it's been hyped up, and they haven't quite told the truth about all of it, okay? But there is some facts and some truth in some of those articles. But we are losing volunteers, particularly in regional parts of Australia. The younger generation don't want to be on farms anymore, okay? Because they're not seeing it as what they want to do. Gone are the days where fourth generation farmers are coming through the ranks, okay? It is happening in some places, but in some places, those young people are going, I want to go to uni and become a doctor, or I want to go to uni and become a pilot, or I don't want to be in rural Victoria anymore, or rural New South Wales, or, outback of Northern Territory. I want to move into a suburb. I want to live life and experience different things. So we're losing volunteers across the country in that aspect alone, because the younger ones aren't coming through as much as what they used to. At the exact same time, we have a massive aging population within our emergency services who are not being backed up they're not being refilled, I guess, or backfilled by this younger generation coming through. So we've got fire stations that are now struggling across the country where there's only 4 or 5 firefighters left. And there's serious concern from those agencies that potentially in 2 or 3 years' time, those older ones are going to retire and there'll be no fire station in those communities anymore. So we've got to think about that. We've got to look at how do we change that process? How do we change the mindset and support people? One of the ways we do that is if we move to this civil defence process, we get rid of the volunteer component right across the country and we move to a retained process. So we have our full-time guys who are on station all day, every day, who are in those areas where high population, high density, high risk. We have those full-timers there. Then every other firefighter is retained. And every fire station, regarded, if it's a current retained station now, fantastic. If it's a volunteer station, we merge those resources together. We make sure people are trained, or everyone gets trained up to a certain level, regardless of where you are now. Everybody gets trained to that certain level to start being a retained firefighter. We provide them with plenty of notice and plenty of time. So I'm talking like you've got to give them probably up to 5 years, where those current volunteers that are in that space now, before they can start being paid as retained, they've got to meet a certain criteria. They've got to get their fitness to a certain point and their health to a certain point. We provide that to them so they've got 5 years to get to that point. Some of them will hit that benchmark immediately, and that's fantastic. Straight away, we're bolstering our numbers. The other guys might need to get dragged along a little bit. And then once we hit that 5-year threshold, or anyone coming into the services within that 5-year period, you have to meet the new requirement, because you will be retained immediately and you have to meet that health and safety requirement, that fitness requirement, and whatever it may be. It sounds like a lot. It sounds like a significant change, but it's a change that we need to start having a conversation about, and we need to start moving down that path. Then they're retained. Make it tax-free for them to make it a bit easier, because that always helps, because otherwise, by the time they get taxed, they're going to be doing it for free anyway. So you might as well retain it, make it tax-free, just like we do with our reservists at that national level. That is going to encourage people to join as well. People go, well, I've always wanted to do that, but voluntary-wise, I can't do it, this, that, and the other thing, whatever it may be. People will then potentially come and join, because they're going to get paid a little bit to do it. Once they're paid, though, they're now an employee, and all the issues we have with volunteers, from HR issues, training issues, fitness, health, all these issues that we have as agencies that our own volunteers complain about, okay, all that stuff's going to come crashing to an end. Because you are now being employed, you must maintain this. And it's going to give command more of an opportunity to say, well, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, your behaviour's being poor, all these sorts of things. We can start looking at actually putting people on paper and potentially moving people on if we have to. Okay, at the exact same time, these retained guys have to be trained at the same level, so we get them to that point. We maintain that training, we maintain that level. All this fighting between volunteers and paid and retainees and all this shit, it should all go out the window. Okay, it should disappear, because we should have one command structure across the board and one set of rules across the board. The benefit to that is our younger guys that are coming through the mix, who want to be permanent firefighters or permanent rescue operators in the future, whilst they're retained and they're working along, and maybe they're doing an apprenticeship at the same time, when they finish that apprenticeship, if they decide I want to be a full-time firefighter, there should be an easier process for them to go from retained to permanent. They should get first dibs at going from retained to permanent versus someone who walks in off the street today and goes, you know what, today I've decided I want to be a firefighter and goes through that 6 months to 2 year process to actually get a job. Those retained guys should get first option to go up if they want to. It's going to make our country a lot stronger. It's going to make our capability a lot stronger, and we are actually going to save money in the long run. Short term, no. But in the long run, we will save money doing this. And that is something that our governments are struggling with right across the board at the moment.
Well, I think after 2 episodes, everyone knows that you can fucking talk.
I told you, mate. You know, mate. Once I get on a roll, I'm rolling, you know?
So after me asking 2 questions, basically, fucking, you covered all my points.
Oh, sorry, mate.
So, well done. Like, but I guess this has made it an easier job for me. I just got to worry about the levels of the sound and stuff like that. So
I keep yelling into the microphone.
But by the sounds of it, it's going to be, this idea is going to be tough to get off the ground if it was ever to happen.
Well, it's tough to get off the ground because people always want to put barriers in place of everything. We always put barriers in place of everything. But if you look and you pay attention to some of the states at the moment over the last couple of years, they're already moving down this path. Okay, just yesterday, 1st of April, Chris Minns, the Premier of New South Wales, has announced that Fire and Rescue New South Wales is going to start looking after all components of rescue within New South Wales.
Sure that wasn't an April Fool's joke?
Well, there's a lot of people who are saying it is an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, okay.
But I wanna say this: if it wasn't an April Fool's joke, then the process is starting. Let's have a look at here in Victoria alone. We know it's not April Fool. Okay, 2 years ago, Fire Rescue Victoria was created, where what was the Metropolitan Fire Brigade and what was the Country Fire Authority paid firefighters merged into one organisation known as Fire Rescue Victoria. Okay, so now we're back to CFA being purely a volunteer space organisation supported by paid personnel. Okay, Fire Rescue Victoria, since they came into play a couple of years ago, have made some pretty clear moves to try and take a number of areas or trying to harness or be responsible for overseeing everything in the fire rescue space in Victoria. That's already happening. It may have been an April Fool's joke up in New South Wales yesterday, but I would argue that if that wasn't an April Fool's joke and somebody wrote it, then somebody's already thinking about it. Queensland is going through the same process at the moment where they're separating their volunteers from their paid. Okay, they're gonna separate and create some new weird organisation that's been on the cards for about 6 months now. They're starting to move down that process. Again, if we look at it, they're kind of going the other way to what every other state's doing, but it's Queensland. They tend to do things like that. Okay, but they're kind of going away from what we're talking about here. The reality is they will get there and realise they've made a really bad mistake, and they will then try and come back in the years to come. All right, so we need to have a look at it and have a real good look, because the other thing we're going to mix into too, we've got another organisation that doesn't get much attention, and they probably should. We've got our ARF firefighters, our aviation rescue firefighting, which is a federal organisation. Okay, they might be owned by Air Service Australia, but at the end of the day, Air Service Australia is a federal organisation, so they are federal firefighters. They sit at every airport in Australia. Okay, wherever it's deemed that risk is high enough for them to be. That's fantastic, but they're still firefighters. They've now got an MOU in most states where they can actually respond within 5 kilometres of the airport to support state agencies in fighting house fires and factory fires and car accidents and things like that. They should be rolled into this system as well. And the way you would do it is you go, when you join, this is the base level training you will get as whatever. Then if you're going to go work in, let's just say, Central Sydney as a fire rescue, as in one of their stations there doing what they do, you then go off and the rest of your time at the academy, you go and learn that bit. ARF would still be under that process. You come through, everyone does their general firefighting, but then the firefighters would then go on and do maybe, 2 or 3 weeks of specialised aviation training. But every firefighter in the country should have the opportunity throughout their career to go and do that specialised 2 or 3 week to become an ARF firefighter, therefore bolstering our numbers on our airfields when we need it. If you look at all of the agencies, volunteer, paid, be it state agencies or look at ARF, Go back over the last 2 years and have a look at their union arguments that they've been having with the agencies. There's one common theme, and that is we don't have enough bums on fire truck seats every day. Short-staffed right across the country every day, right? In every single agency that's out there. We can eliminate that by putting people in and going, well, you know what, if we're short-staffed up here for a week or two or even a couple of months, we can potentially deploy firefighters and rescue operators from anywhere in the country to fill those seats if we need to, if the need arises. Right now, though, we can't do that. And that is fucking ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And then when we deploy overseas to go and help with fires over there or earthquakes over there, we are going to have such a stronger capability to do that and to then backfill the people we've lost who are now, we lose. If you look at New South Wales, I can't remember how many they sent, but I think they sent like 50 or 60 people to Turkey recently to help with the earthquake. Good on them. The guys that went over there, fantastic job. Like, they did some incredible work over there, and they've been, people have been talking about how well they operated. They are some of the best in the world. But when all those firefighters go, that then leaves a shortfall of firefighters to backfill their roles on station in New South Wales. So if we had a better system in play where we've got retainees who can step up and be able to work on a shift for that day, we can put bums on seats again, protecting the community. That's what our job is. So there's lots of argument. There'll be people out there who can throw arguments up to say this is why you shouldn't do this. I can give you a billion reasons why that person's full of shit and why we should do this, because it's going to help the community. And at the end of the day, that is what this should always be about. Everything we argue about should be, how is this going to affect the community? How's it going to be better for the community? This is a much better process for the community and for our own people.
Sounds great. Well, you the listener or the viewer, if you want to have an opinion, or if you've got an opinion on this subject of fire rescue and medical going into a civil defence or transferring to civil defence, let us know on the social medias, Instagram, _staging_area.
That's us.
On Instagram, or the staging area on Facebook. Let us know there if you've got anything to contribute to this conversation, and we will obviously do a Q&A or something like that later on down the track, sure. And we'll be able to cover those. Maybe, we'll go from there. Well, this has been episode 2 of the staging area. I've been Hayden Mack. That's been Simon Roylance. Hooroo.
See you later.